My wife cheated, I got custody of our son, and I moved on. You won't believe what happened next. I recently discovered through a conversation with my wife's friend that she had been unfaithful to me for the past 20 years. I decided to end our marriage. My wife, Sarah, 44, and I, John, 43, have been married for 2 decades, and our relationship began when we were high school sweethearts. She was a senior and I was a junior. During her first 2 years of college, while I finished high school and attended community college, eventually we both moved to the same city for college, and from that point on we became inseparable. We lived together and built a life. We married the summer after I graduated college, and overall our marriage had been great. However, everything changed when I found out she had been involved with several men during those 2 long-distance years. Right after Christmas, we hosted a small gathering with some of Sarah's college friends. It was a warm evening, filled with laughter, reminiscing over dinner, and catching up on old memories. During the conversation, Sarah casually mentioned that we met in high school, though she didn't mention we were dating at the time, just that we knew each other back then. One of her former roommates commented on how amazing it was that we met so young, survived our wild college years, and still ended up together. I laughed along and jokingly said I wasn't sure if Sarah had been as wild as I had. At that moment, her roommate began to share a story, but Sarah quickly interrupted, saying she felt uncomfortable. Her sudden reaction made me uneasy and raised suspicions. I decided to address it and clarified that we actually started dating in high school and had stayed together throughout her college years. An awkward silence settled over the room, and the rest of the evening was tense. As we were leaving, one of her other roommates pulled me aside and suggested that I have an honest talk with Sarah about what really happened during her time in college. College waits, she said. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, so I asked Sarah about what her friend had hinted at. She brushed me off, claiming it wasn't a big deal. I told her it was important for her to be honest with me, but she insisted it didn't matter. Her dismissive attitude only fueled my suspicions. Yeah. When we got home, I decided I had to confront her. I told her I was going to stay at my brother's house until she was ready to talk about what had really happened during her college years. The next day, she came over, visibly anxious. She finally confessed to having slept with several men during her first 2 years of college. She tried to downplay it, saying she didn't think it was a big deal back then because we were long distance and she didn't believe our high school relationship would last. The news hit me hard. I pressed for more details, feeling a mix of betrayal and anger. She admitted it was at least 10 different men, including at least 3 who I had met and who she had introduced to me as friends during my visits, and 1 who she was still in touch with. Hearing this made me feel a flood of emotions: anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. I knew our marriage couldn't survive this. I told her I wanted a divorce and that I would begin the paperwork immediately. As promised, I started the process on January 2nd. Her attempts to downplay her actions and dismiss my feelings only made my decision easier. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about decades of lies and disrespect. I couldn't overlook her cheating on me with multiple men for 2 years. Worse, she had kept up friendships with these men right in front of me, even introducing them as friends. That level of disrespect was unacceptable. Our children, Ethan, 17, and Samantha, 19, are practically adults, and I believe they'll understand why I need to end the marriage. They've seen us as a loving couple, and I hope they realize that my decision is about protecting my self-respect and integrity. It feels like everyone is telling me to overlook years of cheating and decades of lies. Everywhere I go, people are telling me to forgive and forget, to save what we've built. They say I'm being unreasonable and should focus on the good times and the life we've shared. But how can I, when every memory now feels tainted by her betrayal? Ideal. Jennifer. I know I need to leave you quickly. It's not just the cheating. It's the lies, the deceit, and the fact that she continued relationships with those she cheated with. How can I trust her again? How can I look at her the same, knowing what she did, and how she dismissed my feelings when I confronted her? I keep wondering if I'm overreacting, if I'm being too harsh. But then I remember the anger and pain I felt when she admitted her affairs. I remember the nights spent questioning how she could introduce me to these men, how she could maintain those friendships without any guilt. I can't just move past that. It's a betrayal that destroyed our marriage. Am I wrong for leaving? I don't think so. I feel like I'm fighting for my dignity, for the right to not be lied to or disrespected. This isn't about revenge or holding grudges. It's about recognizing that once certain boundaries are crossed, they can't be uncrossed. I'm sharing this because Sarah and some of her friends have told me that it's normal to sleep with other people in a long-distance relationship, and that I'm the odd one out for not doing the same. I felt like I was being manipulated and needed an outside perspective. Since we live in a state with a waiting period to finalize a divorce, I thought it would be wise to seek advice before finalizing everything. After hearing these comments, I see that a few people agree that sleeping around in long-distance relationships is normal, but they seem to be in the minority. During the 2 years she was in college, we saw each other every couple of weekends. I lived about 3 hours away, so while it was long distance, we weren't completely separated. We didn't go months without seeing each other. The 3 men I met during that time were introduced to me at parties, not formal introductions, just casual encounters. The topic of our relationship never came up, so I don't know if they knew we were dating. One of them is still in our lives because he married a mutual college friend. He isn't some secret contact, he's someone we both know well. After learning about Sarah's infidelity, I spoke to him and he told me he had no idea we were in a relationship back then. He has since blocked Sarah on social media, out of respect for me. Some have questioned how her college roommates didn't realize the timeline at our wedding. The answer is simple. We had a small ceremony with close family in Texas. Later, we had a big party for our friends back east, skipping the usual wedding traditions. Because of this, her roommates never pieced together that we had started dating before she went to college. They assumed we began dating during the year we lived in the same city, and that's when we moved in together. This explains why they never questioned the timeline or suspected anything. I was open to therapy or trying to save the marriage. I honestly thought that with some effort we could work through this, but her constant insistence that what she did was normal and that I was overreacting has been too much for me. She keeps saying that sleeping with others in long-distance relationships is common, and I'm unreasonable. The only time she showed remorse or tried to reconcile was when I started filing for divorce. That brief moment of regret quickly vanished, and in the past week she's returned to her original stance, insisting that I'm overreacting. This back and forth has made me feel like I'm being gaslit. It's clear to me that her actions were a betrayal, but Sarah and others tell me it's normal and that I'm overreacting. Her dismissive attitude only adds to my frustration and confusion. I've tried to communicate how deeply hurt I am, hoping she'd understand, but instead she minimizes my feelings and treats them like an overreaction to something insignificant. It's like she's rewriting the rules of our relationship and expecting me to accept them without question. This constant invalidation of my emotions is maddening. I feel like I'm being manipulated into doubting my own feelings. Her refusal to recognize the seriousness of her actions and her attempts to normalize infidelity have created an insurmountable divide between us. It's not just the cheating, it's her inability to understand why it's such a big deal, and why I feel so betrayed. I've reached the point where I need to protect my own mental and emotional well-being. I can't stay in a marriage where my feelings are ignored and my trust has been broken. Her lack of remorse and her insistence that I'm the one in the wrong make it impossible for me to see any future together. I'm not overreacting. I'm standing up for my right to an honest, respectful relationship. I won't be getting a paternity test unless my kids ask for one. I have no doubts about their biological connection to me. And even if a test showed otherwise, it wouldn't change my love for them. They've been my children for 19 years, and that bond won't break. I love them more than anything, and no amount of betrayal from my wife Megan will change that. They will always be mine, no matter what. Until the day I die. We were definitely exclusive when we started dating. Dating culture was different 2 decades ago. Exclusivity was the norm. There wasn't this widespread notion of open relationships or casual dating like we see today. Back then, if you were with someone, you were with them. Period. Before she left for college, we had a long and tough talk about how we'd handle a long-distance relationship. It wasn't easy, but she was firm about staying faithful. She even joked that her father would come after me if I messed around with other girls while at school. That joke wasn't just a joke, it showed how serious she was about our commitment to each other. Another clue was how she reacted to my senior prom. She couldn't attend because of school, and when I suggested going with a platonic friend, she was upset. Her reaction made it clear that she saw our relationship as exclusive. In the end, I skipped the prom and spent the night with her instead. While we never used the word exclusive, everything about our relationship before she left for college indicated we were committed to one another. Fidelity was simply expected, and that expectation was clear in both our actions and conversations. When I followed up with the friend who suggested I have an honest conversation with my wife Megan, she revealed that the number of men my wife was involved with could be in the double digits. There had even been a pregnancy scare, which I had no idea about. Honestly, the number of men isn't the biggest issue for me. What really hurts is that my wife seems unable to understand why her actions were wrong, or why I feel so deeply betrayed. It would make a huge difference if she showed even the smallest desire to fix things, but she hasn't. Every time we've talked, she has dismissed my feelings, telling me I'm overreacting to what she sees as normal behavior. It wasn't until I made it clear that I was serious about divorcing her that she showed any emotion. Defensiveness and anger, but not remorse. Even then, it was clear she was more concerned about the consequences than my feelings. She never once offered to fix things or suggest ways to work through this until I had already begun the divorce process and hired a lawyer. It wasn't about healing our relationship. It was about minimizing the damage. Her boss scolded her, and a final nod from her was from the pedal button on the clock's face. It showed me she didn't truly understand the depth of her betrayal. It's not just about the infidelity. It's about her continual disregard for my feelings and our marriage. Her dismissive attitude towards such a serious issue left me with no choice but to go ahead with the divorce. I believe we can manage co-parenting. Our children are older now, and I've been saving for their college and other expenses for years, so custody and financial matters won't be a huge issue. Both of us are financially stable. I'm open to therapy if she's willing, but at this point, it feels more about becoming effective co-parents and finding closure than trying to salvage our marriage. I've already taken steps to move forward. I hired a lawyer who drew up a document for intent to separate, and it was sent to her by certified mail. This isn't an official divorce filing yet. It's more of a preliminary step, giving her the chance to hire her own lawyer if she wishes to contest it. The actual divorce will take time, possibly months. For now, I'm staying at my brother Rob's house while I figure out a more permanent living arrangement. As for the timeline, the dinner with her friends took place on the 26th. That night I went to my brother's to cool off and give her some space to think. Over the next few days, we had several conversations, and it became clear that she didn't see her actions as wrong. If she had shown any remorse or understanding, I might have reconsidered and waited, but her dismissive attitude left me no choice. I quickly found a divorce lawyer, and we completed the standard intent to separate paperwork which was sent that same day. We're not legally divorced yet, and I'm not sure if separation is a legal status in my state, but I've made it clear that this process is happening. Update. 1. Here's what I learned about her college years. After a few counseling sessions with my wife, Megan, and conversations with 2 of her former roommates, it became clear that her roommates had suspected something was off back then. They mentioned that the situation seemed strange and probably involved cheating. My wife had told them that we both had our fun during college but had worked things out before marriage, so they never felt the need to bring it up. The roommate who had pulled me aside during the dinner felt particularly uncomfortable because my wife had never discussed any of this with me, and she felt I deserved to know. She wrote to me with some frustration and asked why I hadn't been open with her about it. As for the men she was involved with, some of these encounters weren't planned. One of the men she slept with later dated and married one of our mutual friends from college, and he was the one she stayed in touch with during therapy. My wife initially tried to blame me, saying that I pushed her into those situations. She has since admitted it was wrong. When I visited her at college, she often wanted us to stay in her room or hang out alone, but I wanted to experience college parties since I had missed out on that during high school. She never expected me to meet the guys she had been with, but they were often at these parties, and she felt like she couldn't avoid them. While I still think it was disrespectful, it feels less intentional than if she had paraded me in front of them. The whole situation is a mess of half-truths and omissions, making it difficult to process. Her friend suspected but didn't intervene, and my wife managed to keep this secret for years. Most of our therapy sessions have focused on why I see her infidelity as a betrayal and she doesn't. She initially rationalized it by saying none of these men were in relationships with her. They were mostly one-night stands or friends with benefits, and in her mind, that didn't count as a big deal. From my perspective, the nature of the relationships doesn't matter. We never agreed that this kind of behavior was okay. She had actively discouraged me from doing the same. The double standard made the betrayal feel even worse. After some therapy and conversations with friends, my wife started to see things differently. She now admits that her actions violated our trust and the foundation of our relationship. This shift has allowed us to discuss things more openly and honestly, moving from heated arguments to more productive conversations. While saving our marriage seems impossible, being able to talk about the past more openly gives me hope that we can co-parent in a healthier way. This is essential for our children and for navigating the complexities of co-parenting. Now, here's why I'm absolutely certain about getting a divorce. Two major things came to light that made it clear I had to end the marriage. The first was about 10 years ago, when we went through a rough patch and had almost 2 years without any intimacy. She had told me that our physical relationship was becoming boring, so I tried to spice things up. Nothing extreme, just light role play and a few novelty items. But it turned out that she was still fixated on the intimate experiences from her college days, which she refused to talk about. She wanted me to recreate those experiences, but when I did, it made her feel awkward and guilty, because it reminded her of the other men she had been with. The fact that she insists these experiences were meaningless, but they still affect our marriage, tells me they were more significant than she admits. The second thing was that she admitted to flirting with coworkers on business trips since the pandemic ended. She insists nothing physical happened, but it eventually escalated to a date with one of her colleagues. For me, that was the final straw. These revelations shattered whatever trust I had left. The first issue showed me that her past experiences still haunted our marriage, despite her claims otherwise. The second was that she took me for a fourth date when I was training and learning how to be a better safety trainer. The second issue made it clear that she was willing to cross boundaries again, even after everything we had gone through. These two things together made it impossible to see any hope for saving our marriage. We've told our kids about the divorce. We explained it was due to some bad decisions made during college. Decisions we've never been able to move past. During the conversation, my 19-year-old, who is in college, asked me directly if I had been unfaithful to my wife while she was away at school. This question took my wife by surprise, but she admitted to our kids that she was the one who cheated. We've agreed not to share any further details with them. It's essential to shield them from the more painful aspects of our past. So I reassured them that, despite the separation, both of us remain fully committed to being there for them. I emphasized that we're in therapy to navigate the divorce in the healthiest way for the sake of our family, and I made sure the kids knew that if they ever need to talk about it, whether with us or a therapist. They have my full support. I want them to understand they can share their feelings and seek help without hesitation. Their emotional well-being is our priority, and we're doing everything possible to handle this tough time together. We've started talks with a mediator to determine the best course for the divorce, and barring any major changes, it seems like we'll be able to part ways without much conflict. We're both financially stable without significant debts, and since our kids are older, custody won't be a major issue. The past few months have been tough, but I'm holding up. I'm actually grateful that my last post garnered so much attention. It validated my emotions and pushed me to seek therapy with my wife. My 19-year-old daughter Megan has had her own struggles with relationships. She's been hurt by boyfriends who cheated or left her for someone else. Given her experiences with untrustworthy men, I can understand why she initially believed I was the one who cheated. Additionally, since I was the one who left the house, it may have seemed like an admission of guilt to her. At any rate, she was relieved to know I had found recovery and was able to move on with my life. Her past experiences have understandably shaped her perspective, making it easier for her to assume I could be at fault. When infidelity came up, my wife, Olivia, was quick to claim she had been the faithful one, and to be honest, I'm not too concerned about how things are being framed. From what I gather, Olivia hasn't said anything negative about me to the kids, but considering her admissions about flirting and cheating, as well as her readiness to file for an amicable divorce after just a few weeks and a handful of counseling sessions, it seems she was more prepared to move on than I was. Her ability to walk away from a 20-year marriage with ease stings, but it's making the logistics of the divorce simpler. I suspect she's already looking for a new partner. During our mediation meeting, she made it clear that we're still legally married until the divorce is finalized, and that any infidelity before then could jeopardize the amicable terms we've agreed on. That struck me as ironic, given that our divorce is based on infidelity. Still, my soon-to-be ex-wife didn't hide her annoyance when this topic came up. I also suspect that my current living situation, staying in the guest room, might be making it harder for her to move on quickly. In the end, I'm doing my best to come to terms with the end of our marriage. I've been attending therapy on my own, in addition to our couples sessions, to help me cope with everything. I'm mentally preparing for the possibility of running into the coworker she once dated again. However, I'm hopeful that I'll find a new place and move out before the divorce is finalized. If everything continues smoothly with the mediator, we should be divorced by summer, and I'll have my own space. She can then date whoever she chooses. Update. Olivia and I have finalized our divorce, and everything is now official. It was an uncontested, amicable divorce with minimal disagreements. Our lawyers worked together to draft the settlement through mediation, and a judge signed off on it just a few weeks ago. The process was straightforward, though the only real complication came with our 17-year-old son, Gabriel. He insisted on staying with me due to a deteriorating relationship with his mother. Initially, Olivia resisted, prepared to challenge the divorce agreement. However, our son made it clear that she could either give him a few months to heal and rebuild their bond, or force him to stay with her until he turned 18 and risk never seeing him again. Though I thought his stance was a bit harsh, it prompted Olivia to back down. We've agreed that I'll have primary physical custody until his 18th birthday later this year. Throughout this time, I've encouraged Gabriel to remain open to mending his relationship with his mother. Despite her actions before he was born, she did care for and love him for 17 years. As the divorce progressed, I've noticed him spending more time with her, and I'm hopeful they'll eventually reconnect. This has been a difficult time for all of us, but I'm optimistic that, with time, they'll rebuild their relationship. When it came to our assets, we divided everything equally, including our retirement funds and investments. Olivia was fond of the house, but I didn't like it as much, so she kept the house and most of the furniture. To make up for the difference, she took out a mortgage to pay me half the equity and half the estimated value of the furniture. Everything else was easy to split. She kept her car, I kept mine, and we divided personal items like my music gear and her hobby equipment, along with clothing and personal effects. Anything harder to split, we agreed to sell and divide the proceeds. Thankfully, we had documented most of our valuables for an insurance writer, making the process smoother. Things are going well for me now. My kids spend most of their time with me, and we've maintained a close relationship, which was my biggest concern during the divorce. I'm relieved and thankful that this bond remains strong. I've moved into a new home that I absolutely love, and it feels like a fresh start. In a bit of a midlife crisis move, I traded in my old minivan for a sleek Lexus LC 550, which has surprisingly brought me a lot of joy. On a brighter note, a woman at work, someone from another department so we don't directly work together, invited me for a coffee date. I was honest with her about not being ready to date yet, but she was very understanding and said she'd be happy to go out with me whenever I'm ready. This was a pleasant surprise. She's sharp, funny, and because our roles at work are distant, there's no awkwardness when we see each other. Olivia and I are still attending couples counseling, but now the focus is on closure and co-parenting. The sessions have been incredibly helpful for processing everything and maintaining a positive environment for the sake of the kids. Still, it's clear that divorce was the right decision. Through our discussions, it's become obvious that Olivia began dating as soon as the divorce process began. That, more than anything, shows me that whatever love we had was already fading. I'm fairly certain the coworker she claimed was just a friend even dropped her off at our recent counseling session. Surprisingly, this didn't bother me, which confirms that I too am ready to move on. Then the exercise began. I always intended to keep working out. Healing from the betrayal will take time, but I feel I'm making good progress. I can confidently say that the divorce was the right decision. In the last 4 months, I've cried more than I have in the last 20 years combined. But for the last month, I've truly felt good about myself, for the first time in a long while. I'm embracing my newfound independence, staying busy helping Gabriel prepare for college, and looking forward to that coffee date in a couple of months. Going through this divorce has taught me the importance of honest communication. Looking back, I wish we'd been more transparent from the start. It could have saved us both a lot of pain. It's a lesson I'll carry forward in all my future relationships. But most importantly, I've discovered a strength within myself to rebuild and move on. Despite all the heartache, I'm starting to feel like myself again. Scary. The screen focuses on a GAN message from Lois, who's crying right now. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories happening around you.